"Hey lady, your face, it's ruining my meal." The word sliced through the air like a jagged knife, halting everything in its tracks. Can you imagine the shock? The Maple Ridge Grill, a cozy little diner with checkered tablecloths and the mouth-watering aroma of sizzling bacon wafting through the air, fell deathly silent. Plates clinked nervously, coffee stopped mid-pour, and every eye turned toward the waitress, Callie Rodas. Water trembled in her hands, spilling across her apron in a quiet cascade of shame. Her scar, illuminated harshly by the diner's unforgiving fluorescent lights, stood out like a beacon of vulnerability. Yet, she didn't flinch. How could she stay so composed? No one dared breathe a word until a teenage boy, unnoticed in the corner like a shadow, rose to his feet. With a voice steady as steel, he uttered 6 words that turned the whole scene upside down: "She saved my father's life twice." What did he mean? If you've ever witnessed cruelty this raw, stick around. Welcome to Heartfelt Gratitude Stories, where stories of compassion and kindness unfold in ways that'll tug at your heartstrings. Let's dive into what really happened that day. Ben Travers wasn't a man who rattled easily, oh no. He'd spent nearly a decade managing chaotic restaurants in Denver, wrestling with shouting kitchens, endless ticket lines, and furious customers griping about undercooked fries. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for that Sunday morning in the sleepy Montana town of Maple Ridge. The Maple Ridge Grill wasn't some glitzy joint, it was a humble roadside diner with worn vinyl booths, chunky ceramic mugs, and a venison pie so good the regular swore it could mend a broken soul. Ben had only been there 3 weeks, stepping in as manager after the old-timer retired. It was meant to be a breather, a simple gig, a temporary escape from the grind. Boy, was he wrong. That morning kicked off like any other, routine as clockwork. Ben checked the coolers, shuffled through invoices, and caught a whiff of yesterday's grease still clinging to the fryer. The after-church crowd trickled in, their chatter about the weather and football filling the air with a familiar buzz. Everything felt normal, until she caught his eye. Callie Rodas glided through the diner like a dancer in a trance, balancing 3 plates in one hand and a steaming coffee pot in the other. Her uniform was crisp, her posture unwavering, but her eyes? They darted away from anyone who dared look too long. She'd been there longer than Ben, a quiet fixture, always on time, always efficient. But under the stark white glow of the overhead lights, he saw it for the first time, the scars. One snaked from her left temple down her cheek, raw and jagged, another curved along her neck, vanishing beneath her collar like a secret she couldn't quite bury. How had no one warned him about this? Callie didn't hide those scars, not a bit. But she didn't flaunt them either, she just moved with a calm, practiced rhythm, like they were part of her very being. Most folks avoided staring, or if they did, it was a fleeting glance, a quick peek before looking away. Ben wiped the counter, trying not to gawk, when the venom hit. A man at table 6, voice booming like a thunderclap, sneered, "God, look at her face. I came in for breakfast, not a horror show." Laughter exploded from his buddies, sharp and cruel, as forks clinked against plates in a mocking chorus. Callie didn't flinch, she kept pouring coffee like the words were nothing but background noise. But Ben saw it, her fingers tightened around the pot until her knuckles whitened, her shoulders braced as if ready for a blow. She heard every word, how could she not? Everyone heard, yet the diner stayed mute. Why didn't anyone speak up? Ben's heart sank, could you believe someone could be so heartless? He started to move, unsure what he'd even say, when he noticed someone else watching. A teenage boy, maybe 16, sat tucked in a corner booth with his mom. No laughter, no averted eyes, just a steady gaze fixed on Callie. Not with pity, but with something deeper, respect. Admiration. Ben couldn't pin it down, but it stirred something in him. Who was this kid, and why did he look at her like that? He'd find out soon enough, oh, would he ever? You'd think that'd be the end of it, right? But no, 20 minutes later, it happened again. Callie set a plate of bacon and eggs down with her usual grace, but a woman dripping in pearls shot her a glance sharp enough to cut glass. Leaning toward her husband, she hissed, loud enough for all to hear, "Why would they let someone like that serve food?" The word stabbed at Callie's heart, yet she didn't blink. She topped off their coffee, offered a soft nod, and walked away. But Ben caught it this time. The coffee pot quivered in her grip, a tiny tremor betraying the storm inside. Her silence wasn't calm, it was a shield, and it was starting to crack. How long could she hold it together? Ben stormed toward the kitchen, fists clenched. Frank, the grizzled cook, looked up from his grill. "Big guy, I've been here for years," he muttered, reading Ben's face like an open book. "Don't get involved, boss. She's handled this since day one, no one steps in." He shrugged, flipping a pancake. "Most folks are decent, but some. They just can't deal with different." Ben's jaw tightened. How could they just sit there? It wasn't just the cruel words, it was the silence, the way everyone let it slide like it was normal. Didn't it bother anyone else? Later that morning, the cruelty reared its ugly head again. Can you believe it? A little girl, maybe 5, pointed at Callie as she wiped down a table. "Mommy, what's wrong with that lady's face?" she asked, all innocence. Her mother yanked her hand down, shooting Callie a look that twisted Ben's gut. "Don't stare, it's rude," she snapped. The girl blinked, confused. "But she's the one with the scars," she whispered. Ben heard it all, and Callie. She just smiled, a soft, rehearsed smile that hid a world of hurt. How many times had she done this? Minutes later, Ben found her in the back room, splashing cold water on her face, her hands shaking like leaves in a storm. He paused in the doorway. "You okay?" he asked, voice soft. She didn't answer right away. She dried her face with a napkin, then met his eyes in the mirror. "It's just a face," she said, barely above a whisper. "But people treat it like a warning sign." Ben's throat tightened. What could he say to that? She looked down, voice steady but fragile. "You don't need to protect me, Mr. Travers. I'm used to being invisible." Invisible? How could she think that? Back in the diner, Ben's gaze snagged on that teenage boy again, still watching Callie, but not her scars or her uniform. Her eyes. He wasn't avoiding her, wasn't pitying her, he was seeing her. Why? What did he know that Ben didn't? It gave Ben a flicker of hope. Maybe not everyone was blind to her strength. By 11:15, the diner was a madhouse, packed to the rafters. Callie moved like always, quiet, focused, efficient. But something shifted. Did you feel it? Customers started asking for Melissa instead. "I'll take table 4, Melissa mumbled, avoiding Callie's gaze. "They, asked for me." Callie didn't flinch, didn't argue, just nodded like she'd seen it coming. But even in her own section, the stares grew sharper, the whispers louder. Couldn't they see how hard she was trying? Then came table 5. A man in a golf shirt leaned back, eyeing Callie up and down like she was on display. "Isn't there someone normal who can bring our food?" he drawled. "Normal?" Callie didn't blink. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, sir." "I'll find someone else," she said, turning on her heel. Ben counted her steps, 1, 2, 3, 7, straight to the kitchen. He followed, pulse racing. "You don't have to put up with that," he insisted. She looked at him, eyes weary. "It's not the first time. It won't be the last." Her voice held steady, but her trembling hands told a different story. How much more could she take? The final blow crashed in just after noon. Brace yourself. 4 men swaggered in, loud and brash, khaki pants and collared shirts screaming confidence, sunglasses perched indoors like they owned the place. They plopped down at table 9, Callie's section. Ben saw her shoulders stiffen, but she approached, notepad in hand. "Welcome to Maple Ridge Grill. What can I get for you today?" One grinned, all teeth. "Hey, Scarface. Got any pancake specials? His buddies roared with laughter, and another piled on, what happened to your face? Bar fight? Chemical spill? Ben surged to his feet, enough was enough. But Callie raised a hand, not to stop them, to stop him. She locked eyes with the men, unflinching. I was injured in Afghanistan. Now, what can I get for you? Afghanistan? The word hung heavy, but they didn't care. What were you doing there, huh? Serving coffee to the real soldiers, one snorted. Ben stepped forward, but before he could act, a glass shattered on the floor, deliberate, cruel. Oops. Look what you made me do with your shaking. Clean it up. Callie knelt, hands trembling, picking up shards as the diner stared in stunned silence. How could they just watch? And then, oh, you won't believe this, that teenage boy, Josh, stood up. The diner froze, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. Tall for his age, with a mop of curly hair and piercing blue eyes, he strode over to Callie, determination blazing. She saved my father's life twice, he declared, voice ringing out clear and strong. Gasps rippled through the crowd, Ben's heart skipped a beat. Callie looked up, eyes wide with shock. Josh pressed on, my father was a soldier in Afghanistan. He was injured in a bombing, and Callie was the medic who saved him, risked her own life, not once, but twice. The diner erupted, applause thundered through the room. Customers leapt to their feet, faces alight with awe and respect. Callie stood there, tears glistening in her eyes, had she ever dreamed of this? Hugs enveloped her, voices murmured gratitude, and Ben watched, a lump rising in his throat. He'd misjudged her, let his own biases blind him. But now, he saw her clearly, a hero, a survivor, a woman of unshakable courage. Could he ever make up for his silence? As the cheers faded, Callie turned to Ben, voice thick with emotion. Thank you, for believing in me. Ben smiled, eyes misty. No, thank you, for showing me what real strength looks like. The diner hummed back to life, but it was different now, transformed. Customers gazed at Callie with newfound reverence, and she walked taller, her scars no longer a burden but a badge of honor. In that small Montana town, on that unforgettable Sunday morning, a hero was finally seen, and a community forever changed. Suddenly, the air turned heavy as Doi stormed out from behind the counter, her arms crossed like a fortress of judgment. Emma, clock out, she barked, her tone slicing through the hum of the diner. Callie, wiping down a table, froze mid-motion, her scarred hands glistening faintly under the fluorescent lights. I haven't finished my shift, she pleaded, her voice trembling with disbelief. Doi didn't flinch. You're making people uncomfortable, she said flatly, as if that explained everything. It's bad for business. Can you imagine the sting of that moment? Ben, perched at the counter with his coffee growing cold, felt his stomach twist into knots. Callie rose slowly, a thin line of blood trickling from her palm where she'd nicked it on a jagged edge earlier. You're firing me, because of how I look, she asked, her words hanging in the air like a desperate prayer. Doi sidestepped the question. I'm letting you go because of the complaints, she replied, her voice devoid of warmth. The diner fell eerily silent, no clinking of forks, no murmurs of conversation. Even Melissa, usually so chatty, averted her eyes in shame. Ben's fists clenched tight, his knuckles whitening. How could they treat her this way? And then, like a thunderclap shattering the stillness, it happened. A teenage boy, who'd been quietly watching from the corner booth all morning, leapt to his feet. The silence deepened, thick and electric, as every eye turned toward him. Ben's head swiveled slowly, his breath catching. The boy locked eyes with Callie, then faced the room with a courage that belied his years. She saved my father's life twice, he declared. 6 simple words, 6 earth-shattering words, and time itself seemed to halt. Callie stood frozen, her breath caught in her chest. Doi's stern facade wavered. Even the rowdy men at table 9 fell silent, their bravado extinguished. The boy reached into his wallet with purpose, pulling out a worn, folded photograph, its edges softened by years of reverence. He held it high, a beacon of truth. "This is my dad, Captain Joel Merritt, 10th Mountain Division. 2 Purple Hearts," he proclaimed. "He told me about a medic, a woman, who didn't just save him. She saved others, too." Taking a steadying breath, the boy pressed on, his voice ringing with conviction. The first time, their convoy hit an IED. Dad's vehicle flipped, trapping him inside. His leg was crushed, gasoline leaking everywhere, threatening to ignite. Then enemy fire erupted from the ridge. Everyone dove for cover, everyone except her. Ben felt the room shift, the weight of the story pressing down. No more chewing, no more clattering forks, just the sound of held breath. She ran straight into the fire, alone, bullets whizzing past her. She pulled my dad from the wreckage as it began to burn, shielding him with her own body from the second blast. Then, bleeding herself, she carried him on her shoulders all the way to the field hospital. They say she collapsed just 2 minutes after handing him over, but before she did, she apologized. Apologized for being slow. Ben's eyes burned with unshed tears. Callie stood statue still, but her hands curled into tight fists, betraying the storm within. 5 months later, the boy continued, "During a night raid ambush, my dad took a bullet to the chest. His vest stopped it from killing him, but his ribs shattered, his lung collapsed. They called for a medevac, no signal, comms jammed. But she didn't wait. Callie sprinted across open terrain in pitch-black darkness, no backup, no orders, just her and a med bag. By the faint glow of a headlamp, she stitched his lung, improvising a chest tube with a pen casing. Then, with bullets tearing through the air, she dragged him to safety, crawling through rocks and mud. She didn't stop, not until he was safe." Who could hear that and not feel their heart race? The boy turned to Callie, his eyes shining with awe. "I never knew her name, not until today. But I've seen her eyes in the photo on our mantle every single day, a quiet guardian of our family." Then he faced Doi, his voice sharp with reproach. "You didn't ask who she was. You just saw her scars." He swept his gaze across the diner. "But those scars? They're medals of honor. You just don't know how to read them. They tell stories of sacrifice, of lives saved. How could you miss that?" From the back, an older man rose, his frame weathered but resolute. "I served in Vietnam," he said, his voice rough with memory. 48 years ago. I sat here today, watched, and said nothing. "Ma'am," he addressed Callie, snapping a crisp salute, "I'm sorry for my silence. You deserved better." Callie's eyes shimmered, tears threatening to spill. A woman near the counter whispered, "Forgive us," her voice breaking. Even the men at table 9 slumped, their heads bowed in shame. Ben stood rooted, his throat so tight he could barely swallow. How had they all been so blind? The boy took one final step, standing beside Callie, and offered her the photograph. "My dad says he owes his life to you twice. I owe you my father. You're the bravest person I've ever seen." Callie took the photo, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from a flood of emotion she could no longer contain. Her face remained calm, but her heart. You could feel it crack open and begin to heal. Then, a single clap pierced the silence. Another followed, then another, until the entire diner rose to its feet. They weren't clapping for pancakes or coffee, they were honoring Sergeant Callie Rodas, the combat medic, the silent hero they'd finally seen. The applause swelled, a tide of recognition that had been dammed up too long. Callie stood there, eyes wide, hands shaking with something new, relief. She'd been holding her breath for years, and now, at last, she could exhale. Doi stepped forward, her face pale, her mouth a tight line. In her hands, a folded apron, an offering. "I didn't ask," she admitted, her voice small. That was my mistake. I'm sorry. Callie glanced at the apron, then at the faces around her, all those eyes that once avoided hers now brimming with respect, guilt, and something like love. She didn't take it. Thank you, she said softly, but I don't need it anymore. Oh, the power in that quiet refusal. By evening, Callie's story blazed across the internet, sparked by a local journalist's post, the hero behind the scars. It spread like wildfire. 2 days later, a call came, not pity, but purpose. The VA regional office. We need people like you, the voice said. People who understand what it means to come home changed. They offered her a role, community outreach coordinator. She wouldn't just survive, she'd lead, guiding others back from the brink. On her last day at Maple Ridge Grill, the diner buzzed, not for brunch, but for her. People hugged her, handed her letters, or simply stood nearby, their silence heavy with gratitude and shame. Someone pressed a wooden plaque into her hands, "Scars don't shame us. They prove we came back." Josh Merritt stood by the door with his parents. Captain Joel Merritt, in full dress uniform, chest out, eyes clear, stepped forward and saluted. "Sergeant Rodas," he said, voice thick with pride, reporting home. Callie smiled, and they embraced like long-lost family. What a moment. 6 months later, Callie took the stage at Maple Ridge High School on Veterans Day, a navy blazer hugging her frame, a flag pin glinting on her lapel. Her scars remained, bold and unhidden, but now they drew awe, not aversion. Josh, now a junior, introduced her. "Heroes don't always wear medals," he said. "Sometimes they wear aprons. Sometimes their scars carry more weight than any uniform. This is Sergeant Callie Rodas, she taught me what courage looks like." Callie stepped to the mic, and the room hushed. "You might forget my name," she began, "or my story, but don't forget this, scars don't make us broken, they mean we survived. And sometimes we survive so someone else can live." Back at the diner, a new plaque graced the wall by the register, "Courage serves daily in honor of Callie Rodas." Below it, a photo, Callie in uniform, smiling, coffee pot in hand, scars visible, head high. Not all battles are fought on fields, and not all heroes are seen at first glance. But when truth rises, when courage is honored, the world stands. In our darkest moments, kindness still shines, often in quiet places, from those who don't seek praise. Some just want to know no one goes hungry today. That alone can change a life. You might forget this tale, but if no one retells it, history stays silent. Here's my take, raw and unfiltered. The paragraphs about Callie hit me hard because they expose a truth we all dodge: society is obsessed with the surface. We're drowning in a culture that prizes polished exteriors over the messy, beautiful depth of a person's soul. And it infuriates me. Why do we only pause to notice someone's worth when their scars, literal or not, get shoved in our faces? Callie's story, with her quiet strength as a waitress and a veteran, screams resilience, yet it's the kid who has to point it out for the rest of us to care. That's pathetic. I'm passionate about this. We've got to stop sleepwalking through life, blind to the battles people fight daily. Everyone's got their own version of Callie's scars, maybe it's grief, shame, or just the weight of existing. But instead of honoring that, we judge, scroll past, or slap on labels. It's lazy, and it's tearing us apart. I feel this deep in my gut, we need a wake-up call. A world where a teenage boy's courage shames adults into seeing the obvious. That's not progress, it's a plea for us to do better. Here's my plea, let's live with eyes wide open. Ask someone, who are you, really, and mean it. Celebrate the unseen heroes, the ones pouring coffee, surviving, enduring, before they're forced to prove it. If we did that, maybe we'd stop chasing shallow nonsense and start building a society that actually sees people. Callie's not just a story, she's a mirror. What do we see when we look? I say it's time we stop flinching and start feeling. Subscribe to Heartfelt Gratitude Stories, where justice is celebrated, kindness remembered, and no quiet heroism fades away.